Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia must be made to feel a much higher price for the war in Ukraine in order to force Moscow to seek peace. Mr. Zelensky said that until the European Union includes gas in its sanctions package, Russia will use this against every European family by impacting their finances due to the rising costs of gas.
The seventh sanctions package of the European Union is in the final stage of approval. Its elements have already been announced, including a ban on the import of Russian gold. But this is not enough, and I frankly tell my partners about it. Russia must feel a much higher price for the war so that it forces it to seek peace. And now it is worth looking at what is happening on the European energy market. We see how erroneous the policy of some old leaders of European countries, who made Europe hostage to gas supplies from Russia, was. And while the EU does not dare include gas in the sanctions packages, Russia uses gas for its own sanctions against every European family, literally hitting the family budgets of Europeans with pressure on the energy markets. Russia is testing in Ukraine everything that can be used against other European countries. It started with gas wars and ended with a full-scale invasion, missile terror, and burned cities of Ukraine. And so that this does not happen to anyone else, we must ensure a tangible joint victory over Russia in Ukraine. The sooner this is done, the less damage and suffering will be experienced by all European families, all European countries. Therefore, after the approval of the seventh package of sanctions, it will be necessary to immediately start working on the eighth. Therefore, it is necessary to increase the supply of modern weapons to Ukraine, to provide our state with effective air defense.
Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, for the latest developments, we can speak now to AP correspondent Sam Mendnik, who is in Lviv. Good to see you again, Sam. So the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin promising more arms. Russia saying if you put more arms, we'll expand our fight. Like they. Apologies. I'm not quite sure why my phone is suddenly playing up. Okay, clearly you didn't hear me there, Sam. What I was asking you was that the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is promising more arms for Ukraine. Russia, meanwhile, saying if America puts more arms, they'll expand their fight. I mean, does it seem like this is turning into a growing proxy war?
Well, analysts say that the idea of this being a proxy war might be a little far-fetched or something that is a bit premature. What we know right now, though, is that Russia has said it is expanding its operations. Analysts also say this isn't anything new. This is something that we knew from the beginning, even though they have just stated it now. These high-range missiles, though, are being extremely helpful to the Ukrainians, according to the Ukrainian military. They say that they've been able to hit many, many more targets. Soldiers on the ground have also said that these missiles have increased their morale quite a lot. It's given them a new fighting spirit, and then it's really helped them precisely hit more Russian targets. According to Ukrainian analysts, they say that at least 30 Russian important targets have been hit in the last 2 weeks. And so this war is continuing to grind on. What analysts are saying is that it's becoming a deep war of attrition. Neither side looks willing to compromise, and until that happens, it's just going to continue. What we're going to need to see is whether Russia takes its fight from the east, which it says it's going to do, and continues expanding westward. We've seen a lot of attacks in the last week. The president's office has said that 5 people have been killed and 17 have been injured just within the last 24 hours. And this is in addition to more than a dozen people that were killed earlier this week between Tuesday and Wednesday. So as the Ukrainians get more and more long-range missiles, they're hoping to use them and to hit more ammunitions depots and command posts of Russia. It will be interesting to see how Russia does respond. The international community, though, however, has refrained from giving Russia longer-term missiles that could go up to 180 kilometers because there is a concern that those could go into Russian territory, and so they have stopped short at providing Ukraine with those longer-range missiles.
And obviously that limits the scope of what the Ukrainians can do. Meanwhile, of course, Lloyd Austin and another section of his speech, admits that it'll be hard work to keep allies and partners all committed to the war effort if it drags on. I mean, I wonder what the reaction has been to that in Ukraine.
Ukrainians that I've spoken to here on the ground have already said they're noticing waning interest from the West, particularly from when the invasion began in February. They say that there is less interest. This is talking to civilians, to soldiers, to government officials. So they say there's already been a noticeable decline in interest, and there is concern that as this continues, as this becomes a protracted crisis and a protracted war, that interest will wane. What does that mean? Potentially what military officials have told me, as well as analysts, that there could be less munitions coming, less weapons, and as Zelensky said, he thinks he's going to push and push harder for more sanctions, such as to get gas involved in those sanctions packages. He's going to keep pushing, according to analysts, because there is concern that interest is going to fade as time goes on.
And yesterday we were talking to you about those security officials in Ukraine who had been suspended and, you know, some of them fired by Vladimir Zelensky and also by Parliament. I mean, what's the latest on that?
There's no updates at the moment. We're expected to hear updates in the coming weeks about who will replace the people that Zelensky sacked. However, it again speaks to, according to analysts and people on the ground here, the fact that Zelensky is not afraid to shake things up. He's not afraid to make bold moves, especially at a time when the war is potentially moving into another phase. And he's not afraid to do what it takes to sacrifice for the sovereignty of the country, according to analysts. So we're waiting to see who's going to replace them. It's unclear right now who they will be, and so this is something that we'll be watching in the coming days and weeks ahead.
And you touched on this briefly, Sam, but more deadly shelling overnight in Ukraine. I mean, I hope you're safe where you are in Lviv, but we understand that more than 50 shells and 8 missiles hit properties across Mykolaiv, including an aid center and a car wash, and is just one of a series of attacks reported across Ukraine.
This is one of a series of attacks. They were hit in the east, in the northeast. Kharkiv was hit for the second day in a row. 3 people were killed, including a man. The Associated Press reporter saw a woman crying over the body of her dead husband. Yesterday, a 13-year-old boy was also killed in Kharkiv. He was one of 3 people. There was also at least one person killed in Kramatorsk in the east, whose body was found under the rubble of a school that was blown up. There's feared to be 2 more people under that same building. And so these attacks have been constant, incessant, and this comes after comments by Sergei Lavrov from Russia, who said that they are going to expand their operations from the east to other parts of the country. And we're seeing attacks in the northeast and in the south and across the country. And so this is something that Ukrainian forces tell me that they are bracing for more of in the coming days.
Sam, I want to thank you very much indeed for your reporting there. Sam Mednik is the AP correspondent, and she was talking to me from the western Ukrainian city of Lviv.